Welcome to this episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, TJ Martinell. With me is Spencer Pauly. And the King County Council has a $3.96 billion problem that they're dealing with that has to do with affordable housing. And if you live in King County, it's a bit of a problem. Spencer, what's going on?
Sure. So recently, the King County Council was briefed on a housing report that highlighted that $3.96 billion gap you're talking about. Now, that's an annual gap we're talking about to meet the county's affordable housing goals. Now, what is that goal exactly? It is 178,000 units of affordable housing by 2044. Now, currently, we're on track to only reach 1/3 of that. And it's a very complex situation here. And on Monday, the King County Council finally deliberated on that, discussed that report. And there's no solutions at this time. But we found out even more issues in this report, including overcrowding. So that means a lot of families, your households of 4 to 5, are just living in a 2-bedroom apartment rather than a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom apartment. And that's mostly because of a lack of sufficient housing for those larger units.
So just to clarify, when they say affordable housing, they really mean taxpayer subsidized housing. It's not affordable because they built it where the price is affordable. They built it and then they have it subsidized by the county so that the price gets artificially lower.
So actually, a good chunk of funding for this goal comes from these government subsidies like you're mentioning there. I believe it is about 30%, and only 17% of that funding that's been made up to reach that 178,000 unit goal stems from renters paying rent. So a lot of this does rely on your federal dollars, your state dollars, and progressive taxes. I'm talking sales jumpstart payroll tax now. That one, that's also known as the Amazon tax, was supposed to go towards affordable housing, but because of budget deficits on an annual basis, that's being used more towards filling the general fund gap. But I digress. Mostly here, yes, subsidies make up a lot of chunk there for what the county is trying to do. And that's something that was kind of brought up a bit, not directly, but Claudia Balducci, King County Council member and candidate for executive, she said that we need to find a way not just to raise money. We're not going to be able to reach that $3.96 billion gap, right? We're not going to fill that up. Instead, we need to bring costs down and kind of restructure our goal. And hers is try to build 44,000 units of affordable housing within 4 years. So we'll see if that's more feasible, but we're at stage 1 right now again here.
I mean, this begs a lot of questions of, one, why is there a funding gap? Was that a bad estimate on their part? Did they miscalculate? And, what work went into this goal of, 178,000 units by 2044? I mean, where did that number come from, and why did they ever examine the feasibility of that when they set that goal? I mean, these are the questions that have to be asked, because this is not a state, like having a $4 billion funding gap for something at a state level is kind of a big deal, but having that annually for a county, and this is for just one project. This isn't like their operating budget. So
right.
I just wonder how they could have not.
Well, the goal was originally 195,000 units when this goal was first established, and that was in 2019. So a lot has changed since then, right? We had a COVID-19 pandemic, which might have stalled.
Where are these numbers? Yeah, where are these numbers? That's the question asked.
I think I actually don't know, TJ. I would say that they probably looked at calculations of the growing rate, the growing population, the demographics. So we're seeing lower income households and trying to meet that need. No, but once again, this is 2019. So I think that goal is going to just have to be adjusted as it was. And it was from 195,000 to 178,000. And that was mostly because of these new revenues that the county and city installed. But, it's going to have to be adjusted again.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like One, it seems like that's the logical thing to just say, hey, we can't meet this goal. It's not feasible. So let's just lower it and go down to something that's a little bit more modest and not try to. You're not covering a $4 billion, and this is an annual gap. This is not like a long-term gap.
Correct.
In terms of funding.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to come up with money. And if they try to raise taxes, that's going to just make the area even more unaffordable for as far as housing is concerned. It's going to make it more difficult for people to afford to live here.
Yes, and the report says that, TJ, exactly. It put out 3 different ideas, right? So that would include a whole entire countywide property tax to fill that funding gap, which is not feasible whatsoever because it's much more than Seattle's own housing levy that the voters approved. A sales tax wouldn't work at that level, and also a real estate expense tax measure as well. And I reached out to both candidates for executive, Claudia Balducci and Jeremiah Zahalai. I said, would you consider any of these options? And both said no, absolutely not. They're going to have to look at long-term investments and basically collaborating with the state and also Washington, D.C. So if that's feasible or not, I don't know. But they would take a lot to reach that gap that they set out.
Yeah, it seems like the issue has to be getting. Here's kind of part of the problem is that they're trying to get more affordable housing, and they're talking about lowering costs and stuff like that. But one of the other issues is that things beyond their control can make the regional housing market just completely unaffordable. I mean, that Seattle area and the King County is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. And that's due to people coming here who have tons of money and are willing and are able to pay $1.6 million for a home that you could get for $250,000 in Kansas City. So, and that used to cost $250,000. So they're trying to make it more affordable. But the problem is that as people come in with money, they are raising the cost of property that they need to buy and use for these housing. So
this is an issue that rises from affluence, right? So we had the tech boom hit Seattle and King County and cities like Bellevue, which has increased in cost of living as well. And also King County Councilmember Reagan Dunn, the one of 2 Republicans on the council, he talked about how already King County, as you said, is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States. And this is, we're have to talk about gas prices, cost of food, increasing cost of utilities, and a continuing number of taxes that we're seeing. So I think at this point, the county's going to have to consider, how do we just reduce costs and make our region more affordable, not just looking at housing costs, because in a private sector for housing, people are not going to lower their cost of rent. It's going to just stay where it is or increase. So how do we just lower that blow elsewise so that households, like I talked about, the families, the larger families, aren't so cost burdened by just having to pay a good chunk of their income towards rent alone.
Right. And the issue is, if you're wealthy enough, you can afford to pay for this stuff. And if you're poor enough, you can get subsidized housing. It's people who are not wealthy enough to afford it and too poor to not qualify for stuff. And that seems to be the issue that really is going to plague it. But it kind of raises the question of whether or not a county government can artificially make things more affordable because somebody else is paying for it, and can that person pay for it? And what that does to really push out the people caught in the middle, where they're not making they don't work in the tech sector, so they're not bringing in all the money, and they can't afford a $1.6 million home. But they also they're doing too well enough to qualify for any of this housing that's going on. And so, if you're really poor, you qualify for a lot of stuff, and you can artificially afford to live in King County. So,
and if you're in between there, you have to work the those. Yeah, I was going to say, TJ, and if you're in between there, you're working 40 plus hours a week, much more, just to kind of, make ends meet. And it is that issue for, I suppose, the middle class. But what even is the middle class at this point? It seems like you're either struggling or you're not. But but yeah, I expect this is a regional issue here. I think especially King County, where, for those that aren't working in the tech sector, making a high wage or high income, but you're not making minimum wage, but minimum wage already is kind of high, one of the highest in the country over here. So
yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what the county does, if they change their goals, if they try to reduce the regulatory costs of building housing. One never knows what will end up happening. But thanks for the update on this.
Somewhat of an ideological war in today's climate, especially in more of the metropolitan cities like Seattle in this case. But housing first on a lot of people's mind, especially with President Donald Trump's recent executive order over homelessness back in July, vowing to sort of end the housing first model and lean more towards a treatment first approach. Carlene, you've engaged with both sides of this, both the person that helped create housing first and then a nonprofit in Seattle that does a lot of work to help clean up the city and address homelessness, but is very outspoken against the housing first model. Why don't you tell me a little bit about housing first and kind of where both sides divide on this?
Yeah. And it was, I got to give you some props, Tim, because it was your tip to reach out to this Dr. Sam Sambaras, who's basically considered the father of housing first. And it was, he had done a lot of work with homeless population. And he came up with an idea about 20 plus years ago. I think it's actually closer to 25 years ago now, that said the reason people are on the streets, there's varying reasons people are on the streets, right? It's addiction, it's mental illness. I lost my job. I got kicked out of my house, whatever it is. His idea was, let's get people inside. Let's get them a house, and then we can deal with whatever the other issues are that they're facing, their mental illness, their drug abuse, their alcoholism, their need some job retraining, whatever that is. Get them inside to save their life, and then we go from there. That was 20 plus years ago. And it's a model that King County and Seattle, and I know a heck of a lot about Spokane, covering that part of the state, Tim, that is a model that has been widely adopted certainly in more progressive parts of the country and communities that are more progressive. The problem at this point is that the housing first model, according to many critics, and I suppose you could honestly say, based on the evidence, it's not working. We have more people on our streets than ever. We have more drug addicted, mentally ill people on our streets than ever. And the ravage to communities is, undeniable. So that's where President Trump stepped in with his recent, executive order, basically saying we're going to dismantle housing first, and we're going to insist that, we clean up our streets. We get people. Yeah, sure. Let's get people inside, but there will be, in exchange for that, an expectation that you're going to get clean. You're going to get sober. You're going to get in job retraining. And it's not going to be an open-ended, we're just going to put a roof over your head and let you continue in your addiction cycle.
I know the godfather of housing first, he argues that, it is effective in the sense that it's getting people off the street. But I think it's important, as your article did, to put this look at this in a matter of when this idea was introduced, which was coming out of the crack epidemic. And as heroin was increasing in popularity, which, while a very lethal and highly addictive drug, I mean, it's nothing in comparison to fentanyl nowadays. And that's the kind of issue that I see a lot of times between both sides, is that, you have people that support housing first and they argue, look, it is working. And maybe you could argue, yeah, it is working in the sense that you're taking people off the streets, but it's not addressing addiction. And overall, homelessness is still rising across the country. And he kind of begged the question in that clip that you included in your article, and is that, is it better to see people die on the street, or is it better to see people die in shelters? And that's something that I've heard in Spokane, is that, my coverage myself, last year, Spokane had more overdose deaths than it's ever had. And a lot of that was attributed to fentanyl, all, but the majority of those overdoses were within residences. And that's not because it was, say, a grandma or grandpa overdosing on pain pills or something in their living room. A lot of those were happening in shelters. So it's not to say that Housing First is, making things better. It's just taking the death from on street to off the street. It doesn't seem like.
Is that compassion, right? Are we to say, I mean, and you're right. He told me in my interview with that doctor, the father of Housing First, he said, yeah, I mean, it's basically, wouldn't we rather they be sheltered when they die? Well, how about in exchange for that shelter, there is an expectation and a belief that these people can get clean and sober, because the other side of this are the folks with We Heart Seattle and some other nonprofits not funded by the city. These are not NGOs that are getting government funding, grant funding of any sort. This is We Heart Seattle, the people that are on the street trying to get people into shelter with an expectation of recovery as well. I spent 4 hours on the street a couple of weeks ago with Andrea Suarez, founder of We Heart Seattle, and a couple of her, I think she only has the 2 full-time staff members. Others are volunteers. They're 5 years old now. They are of the belief that these lives matter, and they're sick of walking over dead bodies on the streets or finding them inside these low barrier, no barrier housing units where people have, yes, been given a roof over their heads, but are still in the cycle of addiction. They're of the belief that, yeah, we can get people clean and we can change lives. And I am of the opinion, after working on this story for the last few weeks, Tim, that's the only way to go about this. And I know I'm injecting opinion in here as a reporter, but there's nothing compassionate about the model that Seattle and some of these other Housing First do no harm, no harm models are painting. I mean, I sat there in the office of We Heart Seattle and I painted a picture of this word picture in my article. The King County, Seattle Public King County Health hands out these kits. It's got foil so you can cook your drugs on a clean piece of foil. It's got clean syringes so you can inject and not, pass on anything harmful. It's got alcohol wipes so that you can cleanly wipe to find that vein on your arm. It's got all kinds of pamphlets that encourage users, don't use alone. So that you can have somebody. It's got Narcan, of course, the overdose reversal drug. It's got clean bands so that you can tie off, to get a clean vein. I mean, everything to, I suppose, if you're going to continue in the cycle of addiction and we don't believe you can ever stop, save yourself today so that you can use again tomorrow. Is that compassionate? No. And at what cost? We've lost 30,000 lives in the state of Washington to drug addiction in the last 20 years since we adopted Housing First as a model. The United States of America is losing more than 300 people every single day to this drug crisis, and at a massive cost to taxpayers, massive cost. So I know I just got a little bit on my soapbox there for a minute, but when you walk on the streets with these people that are trying to make a difference and you see what's happening to people, there's nothing compassionate about the course, and it needs a correction at this point, or we're just going to lose, 30,000 more people and at a faster pace than we have over the last 20 years, because fentanyl's killing, 3 or 4 people every single day in our state.
And those are needles that are ending back up on the streets too. They might be clean when you get them, but it's not uncommon to be walking around Seattle and to see several hypodermic needles stabbed into a tree or some sort of telephone or electricity pole, to see them covered around parks where children are supposed to be playing.
See them in
Andrea Suarez has talked about that.
Yeah.
It's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed, but looking forward to this executive order and changes that might be ahead. I mean, it's really interesting to see where we'll go, because, the Housing First model, it was largely adopted by the Obama administration back in, I think, pre-2010, during his first term. and it has really just led the way since. And now with this transition, I know you hear the argument from that doctor and other people that support Housing First that, this follows the science. We need to follow the science. But it'll be interesting to see what happens as this new model moves in and these new requirements that these nonprofits that take taxpayer funds, what accountability measures they'll be held to in terms of metrics and outcomes. But definitely something we'll continue to keep our eyes on, and we'll continue to watch your coverage as it comes out.
Kind of brought some more attention to the production of a video made by the Office of Attorney General Nick Brown. And for folks who maybe are on social media often, maybe you've seen some of the posts from AG Brown's office or commented on those. A lot of folks post some very colorful comments, and the AG recently thought it appropriate to sort of make a response video to some of those mocking social media posts. And TJ has uncovered some information about how all that came to be. So TJ, unpack this for us, and then you can kind of share with some of the colorful comments in the video.
Yeah. So this was late August, early September. Nick Brown decided to make a video reading social media posts, which he calls mean tweets, and then commenting on them. And this is something he was directly involved in. He was communicating about it with his staff. He had his communications staff work on it and gather the social media posts and all that lovely stuff. I think we need to keep this all in mind while we go down this rabbit hole. This is the sitting attorney general for the state of Washington. And this is what he's spending his time on, is making a 4-minute video reading social media posts of critical of him. And this is after a state bar complaint investigation was officially launched into him. I've covered this extensively, so you can all go to our website, centersquare.com/Washington, and go over that. But this is what he's doing while this is going on. So I think the other thing that that struck me while reading this and watching the videos and going through the records is using the term mean tweets, using the word mean. I'm sorry, but as a guy, you stop using the word mean to describe somebody saying something to you when you're in like junior high.
I was going to say seventh grade. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like you go to a recess teacher and say, Timmy goes up to the recess teacher and says, Tommy's being mean to me. And they say, well, figure it out. Like we don't, this is not a word. This is not a word that this is not a word a grown man should be using to describe criticism of him, right? This is, there was one of the social media posts said he sounded like a high school girl. And my response or my thought on that is actually it's more like junior high, if not middle school.
It's important, TJ, that, like you say, this was produced taxpayer time, taxpayer resources, right? And you got public records that documented all the internal communications about this. Was funny. Reference the laugh track discussion.
Yeah, so there was a discussion about whether to have a laugh track in this video, and Nick Brown really wanted it, and his chief of staff said, this is kind of distracting. And Nick Brown responded, it reminds me of late talk show hosts. And his chief of staff says, yeah, but they have an audience. And maybe I'm reading too much into the chief of staff's email, but notice there was no emoji or him being funny. I think that this guy was probably thinking to himself, why are we doing this? Out of all the things that we could be doing.
Right. And important to note, and you already referenced it, this was happening at a time when his office is under investigation. He was under a Washington State Bar Association complaint, which was subsequently closed, coincidentally the same day that you inquired about it, or within hours of your inquiry. So he was under very serious investigation, ethics complaint, lots of concerns there. And meantime, his effort and energy is on producing a video that were mocking some people that probably felt they were making very legitimate complaints against the way he's running the office.
I think that's there's a couple of issues. One, it's a elected official mocking his constituents, but he's also the state's top attorney. He legally represents the people of Washington. So this is a lawyer potentially mocking his own clients. Right. Because some of these people, I presume, live in Washington state. And so it's really a question of, you're a lawyer. I don't think you should be doing people would argue you shouldn't be doing this online. But on top of this, he's got dozens of lawsuits filed against the Trump administration. He's got his office is one of the largest in the country in terms of staff. He's got his office has over 1,000 active contracts with outside law firms. So clearly they've got a lot going on. What exactly does he do during his day? Like, what does his day look like where he's able to make, and also, why are you scouring the internet looking for people making complaints about you? I post stuff on social media. Sometimes stuff will go, get a lot of comments. I don't read the comments because I really don't care. Is somebody with an anonymous account that has some weird name and says something really random or incredibly critical? I don't care what some random person says online. And even if I post an article, like, there's some people who will say things that are incredibly ignorant, I really don't care. I don't even bother to respond. So why is he so interested in what random people, and I don't think a lot of these people even use the real names. They're just anonymous accounts. Why are you so hung up on this?
And on top of that, it certainly did seem as if it was sort of a deflection, redirection as to, what the serious issues were of the day.
Well, and here's the other thing. I think more people laughed reading my article about the video than actually laughed at the video, because what's the joke? Like, how is this funny? It's not just using taxpayer dollars. Like, it would have probably been more entertaining for him to do a live streaming video of him playing Command & Conquer Red Alert or some classic 1990s PC game and just making random comments. Like, if you're going to do a video, get everybody together and film your guys playing GoldenEye 64 slappers only, or something that might be funny or we can laugh at. But reading these tweets and making kind of sarcastic or what would we call it? Snarky remarks. What's the joke? Aside from the taxpayer dollars, it's not even. I'm watching it. It's just like, I understand why he wants the laugh track in there.
Well, and the fact that it went on for more than 4 minutes, it's one thing to post like a 30-second little funny thing on YouTube with the AG, and maybe if it had been more self-deprecating, right? Making fun of himself, like, I get you're not pleased with everything. I'm going to work harder, whatever, something like that, some acknowledgement, but rather to be dismissive and insulting, right?
But that's kind of the point of, like, people would point out, well, what about Donald Trump? Donald Trump actually this isn't political. This is not getting into politics, but he can self-deprecate. He does do goofy dances to the YMCA. He pretended to be a McDonald's waiter or whatever.
Driving the garbage truck. Yeah.
He drove he does funny things, and he doesn't take himself seriously in that regard. And then you got guys like JD Vance posting his Halloween costume, which was a feat. It was based off of a meme people made of him. And then they were trying to make fun of him for it, and he just agreed and amplified. That's funny. And what's also funny and ironic is one of the tweets Nick Brown read said, "When are you going to do your job?" And it's like, Attorney General Brown, you are reading a post, you are taking time to do something that has nothing to do with your job as Attorney General, reading a social media post asking you when you are going to do your job and thinking that you're making fun of it. You're kind of proving the point of the social media post that you're mocking. That's 100%. Critical.
I think
just proving your point. So again, if you want to make fun, but the problem is here's the other thing. His job is he's got a serious job as Attorney General. And so there's not a whole lot that's funny about the stuff that he does. And politicians aren't supposed to be comedians. They're not there to entertain us. There's a lot of jobs where you do kind of serious work. Now, granted, there's other social media accounts for government agencies like the Washington State Department of Transportation. They occasionally post stuff that's being funny, but it's not at the expense of anybody. They're just trying to just make their posts a little bit more interesting. And then there's the city of Kent. I don't know if the person's still running it, but their X account years ago was hilarious. They said really funny stuff, but they're also providing information. So you're the attorney general. You might want to just stick to talking about the work that you're doing and how that's affecting Washington State, and also not being terribly interested in what random people online have to say. You should be more concerned with what people like, I don't know, the State Bar Association had to say about that complaint that your office told me was meritless. And yet, as we're going to find out, or we found out recently, they put a lot of time and effort into the response. So clearly there was merit to it.
And you reached back out to them for any comment on the video, to WSBA. I don't know. Did they give you?
Yeah, I asked them. They didn't say anything. They did say we can't comment on it because it would violate our rules. Like, basically they're saying it's a private investigation, except I got records just recently, and there's going to be a story coming out about this where I know how this investigation went down because it wasn't private. It was subject to public disclosure. And it was subject to public disclosure because they were communicating with the Attorney General's office, thus making the investigation public and creating public records for it. So they can claim that it was private and they can't talk to me about it. And they also said, well, there was no discipline filed against Brown. And I go, yeah, that's kind of what I was inquiring about. Is he's in the middle of a State Bar Association investigation, and he's making videos mocking potentially his own clients. So do you not have any comment about that? Like, does that violate any professionalism on a part of a lawyer? I don't fully know or am aware of the full code, but they didn't comment on it. And then I gave them a follow-up response and they didn't say anything. So it's really a question of another example of where, with this whole thing, Brown used taxpayer dollars to defend a private law firm's continuous access to federal contracts. They used public taxpayer dollars to defend him in a state bar complaint. And now he's doing videos using taxpayer dollars to mock people who pay his salary. Is
that legal? Can he be? I mean, I guess he could say it's in promotion of the office. Was it a gray area?
I mean, I would ask the state ethics board if they weren't run by the Solicitor General of the Attorney General's office. I mean, I would ask them. I've reached out to No, you can't. Like, if we're going to talk about something that's funny, it's the fact that we can't ask anybody about whether this violated anything, because the answer ultimately to Noah Purcell, who's the Solicitor General and is a subordinate of Nick Brown. So if there's a joke, it's the fact that the people who would hold him accountable are answer to him ultimately.
And we're finding that in so many stories that both you and I have been reporting on lately, right? I mean, who's ultimately responsible? The people responsible are going to maybe give a pass in many situations because this is all part of a grander plan. But I digress. But I hope folks will go to your article at thecentersquare.com/Washington. There's a link to the video, and it's worth a couple of minutes of your time, even so you can kind of understand the tone of it, because I think you hit the nail on the head where I get that, politicians, state agency officials are trying to utilize social media and be relatable, right? Or they know that many of their constituents are only digesting news from social media, right? What did I hear this week? That I think it's like 70% of people under the age of 25 get their news off TikTok, which is a little scary. But so I think they understand.
Why it's not funny? That's scary. That is truly scary.
That is terrifying. But I mean, I get that they're trying to utilize that resource, but I think this one might have flopped because there was nothing self-deprecating about it. It came across as very insulting of the very people that were, making those mean comments to the AG. So I encourage folks seeing this to read your article at thecentersquare.com/Washington. I know there's more to come. You've been all over covering the Attorney General's office and your insistence on some transparency. I know you're not giving up on that. So thank you, TJ Martinell. And along with TJ, this has been another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host today, Carlene Johnson. Thanks for watching.